Greetings, Twitter. How are y'all doing? It's been almost exactly a week since the last time I was on, and I've been wanting to come online earlier, but I've been under the weather. My throat's kind of shot, so forgive me if I sound a little hoarse. But there is something that I did want to talk about, and it's something that came up just as you know now. Finally, the U.S. House has elected a speaker. We all know who it is, Kevin McCarthy, and they're beginning to do a lot of things that they said they were going to do. Things that some people will say they're questionable. Some would say, well, they're in the right to do it after what happened with the liberal Democrats and stuff like that. But one of the things that was discussed was articles of impeachment for Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, and that's kind of what I wanted to touch on because they're saying that all sorts of things, that he lied, that he misstated, that he didn't fulfill his duty, and I sat down this afternoon to try to go through the actual articles of impeachment, which is House Resolution 8. As you can see, I have it here on I had it on my screen. The screensaver kicked on. House Resolution 8, trying to see exactly what it is these conservative politicians are trying to do. And in reading it, I kind of glance at it and I kind of see it, and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of holes in this document that would, I guess, there's no adequate substantive case to support these articles of impeachment. Now, I want to go ahead and look at this. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here, run through it really quickly. I'm going to jump between that and some points here I have on Keynote, and to talk about exactly where I think there's issues that the Republican Party is not going to have an adequate offense or an adequate case, as the case may be. Basically, this is House Resolution 8, impeaching Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security, for high crimes and misdemeanors. This is a 9-page document. It's got multiple articles. But I want to basically look at a couple of paragraphs that I found that in reading them, I question them because there is outstanding laws or codes to support the Secretary of Homeland Security. Here in line, and I'm going to run through them quickly, and then I'll go back and talk about them here in a little more detail. It says, he talks about that the Secretary of Homeland Security is to maintain operational control over the international land and maritime borders of the United States. And then in line 16, it says the term operational control is defined as prevention of unlawful entries into the United States, including entries by terrorists, other unlawful aliens, instruments of terrorism, narcotics, and other contraband. Now, the pretense of this case, impeachment case, that this representative from Texas, unfortunately, is presenting is that, one, he's not detaining the immigrants at the border, and two, he has allowed drug fentanyl, to cross into the U.S. My argument here is not as much the fentanyl. I mean, I have not yet gotten to that part of the issue in these articles of impeachment, but I have sat down and reviewed and did a little research on the immigration aspect of it. And I think this is everything that he speaks about immigration-wise. There is a 50 to 60% of it being a misnomer, in the sense that he's arguing points that are protected by law. I'm going to get into that in just a few moments. He starts quoting statistics here on that same page on line 20 about 5,500,000 illegal aliens have crossed under the leadership of Mayorkas. 20 straight months of over 150,000 illegal border crossings, which, if you do the math, it's more than likely 2.5 million illegal border crossings, which is a 180% increase. Now, he talks about other stats here, the individuals on the terrorist screening database. I'm not going to get into that. He talks about the fentanyl crossing the border in the last 2 months. And then he comes down and says that Mayorkas is in violation of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which requires the Department of Homeland Security to detain inadmissible aliens arriving in the U.S. or aliens who are present in the United States without inspection or due process. Now, it's important to keep that in mind. When I come back to it, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. It says, in violation of law, Secretary Mayorkas implemented catch and release directives such as notice to report process and parole, plus alternatives of detention process, which this is something that is legally permissible under the asylum code, and I will show you the code and talk about it here momentarily. We keep going down through here. He keeps talking about Mayorkas violating the law and endangering the national security of the United States through these actions. He does talk a little bit about also that Mayorkas is wanting to get rid of Title 42, and that's a whole other thing that I'm going to talk about here in just a bit with respect to immigration. Now, I want to go to I put these specifically on Keynote because I wanted to touch base on them just a bit, and this is what I have here under articles of impeachment. It's House Resolution 8 of Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, the first paragraph that I discussed, it says the term operational control is defined as the prevention of all unlawful entries into the United States, including entries by terrorists, unlawful aliens, instruments of terrorism, narcotics, and other contraband. So he's talking about operational control and the prevention of unlawful entries. Now, we have to understand that the vast majority, let me go back to this, the vast majority of all these entries that have come into the country are asylum and refugees. Well, more asylum than refugees, because the refugees, this was something that started happening under the supervision of President Donald Trump back when he was first elected. There was some asylum issues that he permitted asylum or refugees to come into the U.S. I believe it was from Iraq, if I am not mistaken, or Afghanistan. I don't remember exactly which. So, but suffice it to say, there is the vast majority of these, and looking at the figure right now, and I'm going to show it in a minute, is, he says 5,500,000, but I found another statistic that says that in this past year it was 2,300,000. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about what's called 8 U.S. Code Section 1058 of asylum. Authority to apply for asylum. This basically authorizes, this is the law, authorizes immigrants to apply for asylum, and it says when they can do it. It says authority to apply for asylum under A. Number 1, in general, any alien who is physically present in the United States or who arrives in the United States, whether or not at a designated port of arrival, and including an alien who is brought to the U.S. after interdicted in international United States waters, irrespective of such alien status, may apply for asylum in accordance with this section or, where applicable, Section 1225B of this Title 8. What does this law say? It's basically saying if you're an immigrant, you have the right to apply for asylum either in your home country or upon arriving to the States. Now, actually, if I were to pull up the rest of this code, it would say that it is necessary for the individual to be in the U.S. to request asylum, and that certainly there is no process for them to request asylum in their country in some of these instances. So basically, this code here is saying, okay, if you arrive in the U.S., you have the right and to apply for, and you are eligible for asylum. This code here is going to be the downfall, I would think, of this entire article of impeachment, because what this politician is saying, Mr. Fallon from Texas, is that Mayorkas is violating immigration law by admitting these people into the country that are unauthorized. The thing is, they are not unauthorized because this code authorizes them to request asylum upon arrival. So these immigrants are acting in accordance to Title 8 of the U.S. Code, Section 1158. So, in essence, they're not illegal per se. And I think that's the misnomer that everybody right now has been saying, is that they're coming into the country illegally. Technically, they are coming in illegally because they're not applying for visas in their home country. But the fact that they're allowed to apply for asylum upon arrival, and if they do surrender themselves, which the majority do, then they're eligible for asylum and they're considered lawfully present once they are processed and are set on the immigration court docket. And that's another thing we need to talk about. There's another paragraph. It said that we were talking about earlier. It said there have now been 20 straight months with over 150,000 illegal border crossings. That's basically 2.4 million illegal border crossings. It says Secretary Mayorkas has presided over 180% increase. That's the percentage that they figured in encounters at the southern border compared to the previous administration. So he's saying there is an increase in entries to the country. Now, as I was saying earlier, and this is in the next slide, it says that I was saying that the immigrants that are coming into the country, these 2.3 million or however many have come in just this year alone, and this is not adding the ones from prior years, which obviously are going to fall into that same category. It says over 2.3 million entered the U.S. seeking asylum this year. Over 1 million of those were expelled under Title 42. The statistic that I found for refugees was 125,000 of them were refugees, but I think that's monthly. I'm not 100% certain. And the remaining 1.3 million are processed into asylum and are part of the immigration court backlog. So the remaining 1.3 have been legally admitted under asylum. They're just waiting for the court to determine whether or not they are going to get asylum or not. Okay? And that's one of the arguments that they're putting, is that they should be sent back to Mexico to wait the case. There's no legal, other than the migrant protocols, which were terminated by the U.S. There's nothing else that authorizes them to be returned to Mexico or to their countries. All right. This next section, which I think I read earlier, but if not, we'll read it now. It says, under Secretary Mayorkas, and this is in the actual impeachment article, under Secretary Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security is also in violation of the Immigration and Nationality Act, Title 8 U.S.C. Section 1101. This is the same section where I pulled asylum. It says, this act requires the Department of DHS to detain inadmissible aliens arriving in the U.S. or aliens who are present in the United States without inspection until processed. Right here, this representative is quoting the exact same code that I just referenced, and he's basically shooting down his own case, because he's saying he is there to be detained and until they have completed their process. Well, once they completed their asylum process, then they can either remain or be deported. What's happened here is that there's so many of them have come in that immigration does not have the capacity to hold them. Hence the catch and release, it says, so we go back here, it said aliens who are present in the United States without inspection or until process. In violation of the law, Secretary Mayorkas implemented catch and release directives such as the notice to report process and the parole plus alternatives to detention process. Though these misguided programs, over 1 million illegal aliens have been recklessly released in the interior of the United States. Well, they've been released, but they've been released because there's no place to hold 2.3 million or 3.5 million, or how many have accumulated over the vast several years. I mean, that would require vast amounts of capital to be able to cover the cost of detaining and holding these people, given the vast backlog that is in the immigration case. And this is the argument that DHS Secretary Mayorkas is talking about when he says, well, the laws have not been passed and not been updated to handle this situation. They haven't, in all honesty. And until they are, I mean, you can only do so much with, what you got. I mean, they're asking him to detain all the people, but they never gave him the money to do that. As a matter of fact, the past legislation, they gave money to DHS, but they specifically earmarked it for building a wall. Was any money given to create facilities to detain these people? No, unfortunately. So hence, this is the legal argument one of the legal arguments that Mayorkas is going to be giving. Another section says, attempting to eliminate Title 42 authority as a critical tool enabling the U.S. Customs and Border Protection to quickly expel illegal aliens. He's being accused of eliminating Title 42. This is the biggest misnomer in the entire articles of impeachment, for the fact that Mayorkas did not implement, and he never implemented, and he never he never originated or authored the act of implementing Title 42. That is a health law which is governed by the Surgeon General of the United States in conjunction, I believe, with the CDC. They made the determination to implement it. They said for a limited amount of time, and when the expiration date came the first time, they extended it. And I don't know how many times they extended it after that, but upon their determination, they decided that then we're not going to renew it, so they let it expire. This is what's in my next slide. It was implemented by the Surgeon General and the CDC. It had an expiration date, which was extended 2 or 3 times. But both the Surgeon General and the CDC chose not to renew it or extend it. So this put the DHS in a position that they had no jurisdiction or authority to renew or extend Title 42. So I don't see how this representative in these articles of impeachment can blame Mayorkas. They have no authority to blame Mayorkas for something that is not in his jurisdiction, not in his authority to do so. He can enforce the law, he can enforce Title 42 only when and if the health, the Surgeon General says, okay, we gotta close the border because we have a health issue, such as with COVID. But when that danger passes and these authority figures, the Surgeon General and CDC, agree to dismiss it or let it expire, Mayorkas has nothing to say in the matter. So there's no manner or way that he can legally enforce something that he has no authority to renew, to extend, or even terminate, because he's not terminating it. Okay, that is an important factor that I believe will cripple this articles of impeachment, because they're assuming he has an authority that he does not have. Okay, and that is basically those are as I would say, the holes in the Swiss cheese that are going to deflate this impeachment case. Now, I have not touched. Oh boy, give me a second. I have not touched the issue of the fentanyl, because that's a whole different ballgame. I'm going to research that a little bit more, and then I might come back and talk about it. But as it stands, from what I've pointed out, what I've read, their case is not going to be very strong and to impeach him, because they're basically saying he violated a law when there's another law to support what he's been doing. That's the gist of this, and I think that this representative may have acted a little too hastily in filing these articles, and I believe over time, if they are duly investigated correctly, the committees in charge of this, which I believe is Judiciary, is going to have to draw the same conclusion. If they don't, then it it's basically going to mean that they don't care. And I think, in all honesty, if they have the cojones, they will look at this thing respectively and make the correct decision. So I just wanted to share that with you guys tonight, and hopefully I will try to get back on track and do some more live streams. I might do another one here in the next half hour. I haven't decided yet. Seeing how my throat's going to hold out, because I've been dealing with a head cold for a week or so. No, about a week. When I was on last week, it was barely starting. I didn't have the congestion or whatever that came with it later on. So I'm going to try to get over this, but I do want to keep posting because there's a lot that's happening, and I want to talk on a lot of topics. So we'll go from here. Have a good night. If you see me in the next 30 minutes, then I'll welcome you back. If not, whenever I can get back on again, then I have enough voice to do so, I will most certainly do. So thank you, and have a good night.